I was 15 when this happened, a sophomore in high school living just outside Denver, Colorado. It was Easter Sunday, and my extended family had come over for brunch and the usual egg hunt in our big backyard. I wasn't exactly thrilled to be spending the day babysitting, but I didn't have much of a choice. My younger cousin Caleb was 6, and for some reason he was glued to me the entire day. He was a quiet kid, more observant than playful, and had this habit of staring too long. Still, I tried to be cool about it and stuck by him. During the egg hunt, so he wouldn't get left behind our backyard, connects to a patch of woods that stretches down toward a creek. Maybe 2 acres of brush and pine. The younger kids were told not to go too far. But you know how that goes. At one point, Caleb wandered off the trail while chasing a purple egg behind a fallen log. I called after him, annoyed, and followed him deeper than I should have. The rest of the kids were laughing back near the house, so no one really noticed. Caleb kept walking, not even looking back, like he knew exactly where he was going. He finally stopped in a small clearing where the air felt cooler and unusually still. "There's more this way," he said, pointing beyond the trees. He looked around but didn't see anything, just dead leaves, some broken branches, and silence. Then he suddenly turned to him and asked, "Why aren't you talking?" He laughed, confused. "I am talking, but it frowned like I just said something weird." "You haven't said anything since we got here," he whispered. "You were quiet the whole walk." That unsettled me, because I'd literally been calling his name the entire time. Before I could respond, we heard movement from behind. I turned quickly, expecting maybe one of the other kids, but there was no one there. I brushed it off and told Caleb we should head back. He looked hesitant but nodded as we turned around. I saw something that made me stop walking. There were 2 sets of footprints ours, but something was off. They didn't line up with how we'd come in one set, curved slightly off to the side like someone had walked parallel to us the whole time. Caleb didn't seem to notice, or maybe he was pretending not to. I tried to stay calm and said, "Let's get back before they call us." We started walking, but it felt like the trees had shifted. I don't know how else to describe it. Everything looked the same but slightly wrong. Like someone had rearranged the forest just enough to confuse me. Caleb ran ahead, weaving through the trees like he knew a shortcut. I called after him again, and this time he actually looked back then. He tripped when I caught up. He was staring up at me, eyes wide, breathing fast. "You were just behind me," he whispered, "but I saw you ahead." I helped him up, brushing dirt from his knees, but I could tell he was shaken. "You probably saw a tree shadow or something," I told him, though. I didn't believe it myself. His hand clutched mine tightly the rest of the way back. We pushed through the brush and finally saw the backyard. The other kids were already done with the egg hunt. A few adults were gathering the plastic plates and tossing out candy wrappers. No one seemed to notice we'd been gone that long, but something else was strange. Caleb's mom was staring right at me, and she didn't look relieved. Instead, she looked confused, almost afraid. She came over quickly and pulled Caleb close, looking me up and down. "You're back," she said. Carefully, I blinked. "Yeah, we just came from the woods. Why?" Her expression didn't change. Caleb still clutching hers. "Sure it said something I'll never forget. That's not the one I came back with." His voice was quiet but clear. "He's different now." Everyone paused just briefly, but long enough for tension to settle in the air. I looked around, expecting someone to laugh or brush it off, but they didn't. His mom knelt and looked me dead in the eyes. "What do you mean?" she asked him. you were with him the whole time." Caleb nodded slowly. He followed me into the woods, but when we came back, he was already here. My stomach dropped. I hadn't seen anyone else in the woods. No one passed us on the trail. I wanted to defend myself, but words felt heavy. Everything suddenly felt colder. Quieter, I looked at my cousin. He looked genuinely terrified of me, like he was holding back tears. One of the uncles broke the silence, saying it was just a weird joke, but no one laughed. I didn't sleep well that night. My mind kept replaying Caleb's words over and over, trying to make sense of them the whole "he was already here" thing sounded impossible, like a kid's imagination, but deep down it had planted something, doubt. I couldn't shake the next day. I avoided everyone, even Caleb. I kept checking them mirror, noticing small things that felt off. My voice sounded a little different, maybe deeper, and my room, something about it felt unfamiliar, like I was visiting instead of living in it. When I finally went downstairs, my mom paused mid-conversation and stared at me. "You okay?" she asked, her voice cautious, inaudible. But she didn't look convinced. She kept glancing at me like she was searching for something that wasn't there. That afternoon, I heard my parents whispering in the kitchen. I only caught a few words. "Since yesterday, not quite right, maybe. He's just tired." It felt like they were talking about someone else, but I knew exactly who they meant. I needed to know what Caleb meant, why he thought I wasn't me. So I messaged him asking to meet behind the shed near the woods. Here, replied quickly with just one word: "No." It stung more than I expected, like he genuinely believed I was dangerous. Later that evening, I walked to the edge of the backyard, stopping right where the forest began. Everything looked the same as yesterday, yet different, like it had memorized me. I stared into the trees, wondering if something really had followed us back. I took a step forward and another, following the same trail as before. The wind picked up slightly, and for a second, I thought I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, but nothing was there, just branches swaying, whispering things I couldn't understand. Back in the clearing, I stood exactly where Caleb had found that purple egg. The silence was heavier, now pressing against my ears. I crouched down and saw something I missed. Yesterday, 2 long parallel marks in the dirt, like something had been dragged. Then I heard a voice, my voice, from behind me. I spun around fast, but the clearing was empty still. I could have sworn I heard my voice, calm but distant, calling my name. There was no one else. Nearby, I stood frozen, heart racing, every instinct screaming to leave. Then I saw it, a figure between the trees, maybe 15 feet away. Same hoodie, same jeans, same everything. It was me, but it didn't move, like me. It tilted its head in this unnatural way, too slow to be human. It's mild, not friendly, but knowing, I backed away, without turning, like prey from a predator. The thing didn't follow, it just watched as I disappeared through the brush, never breaking eye contact until the trees finally swallowed it. When I made it back home, I locked every door and stayed in my room. My parents knocked a few times but didn't answer. I didn't know how to explain what I saw. I didn't even fully believe it myself. The next morning, I heard them talking again about me. "He's quiet," my mom said, like he's just watching. I couldn't take it anymore. He needed proof, something I could point to and say, "This isn't just in my head." So I went through our home cameras we had, one pointed at the backyard from Eastery, scrubbed through the footage, my hands sweating. And then I found it. Caleb and I walking out into the woods, and Mir turning twice the second version of Makame back. Minutes later, behind Caleb, his walk was jerky, like he didn't know how legs were supposed to move. He followed Caleb into the yard and stood there perfectly still for almost 10 minutes. Then he turned slowly toward the camera and stared, not blinking, not moving, just watching a hit pause. That face wasn't mine. It had all my features, but something was off. The eyes were empty, like they were looking through the screen. I showed my parents. They went pale. My mom started crying quietly. And my dad turned off the video that night. They asked me something I'll never forget. Are you our son? I didn't answer because I wasn't sure anymore. It's been 3 years. Caleb refuses to come over, and my parents treat me like a stranger. I can't blame them some nights. I still hear footsteps in the woods, and sometimes I see him. He just stands there waiting. I don't go outside anymore, not at night, not alone. And I never returned to the clearing because, whatever I followed into the woods at Easter, it came back too. I was an obedient child and never got into much trouble. Maybe that's part of why I was never tough and got scared. Easily have to admit that I was a bit of a crybaby. I must have been around 9 years old when this happened. It was the day before Easter, and I was thrilled. Every year my parents would hide chocolate eggs for me around the house. And in the morning, the glorious search would begin. By then, I already didn't really believe in the Easter Bunny or Santa anymore. Kind of had a feeling that my parents were behind it all. Of course, this feeling was right, but my childish faith was not completely gone yet. I was just doubtful that one night, however, my faith was renewed. I think the doubt came in when I was 7. And heard my dad curse loudly that one night when he hit his head carrying one of my Christmas presents downstairs so I would find it. In the morning he must have thought I was asleep. Well, I wasn't, so I heard him whisper shout at my mom to help him and take that goddamn bird cage. Already guess what? I got a bird for Christmas that year. He had to give it away a few months later though. But that's an entirely different story. Anyways, it was the night before the Easter egg hunt, and I lay in bed shivering with excitement. I couldn't sleep, and I didn't even try to. I heard my parents shuffle about downstairs. They were talking in hushed voices, creaking. On the lower staircase told me that they were sneaking around the house, probably hiding candy for me to find in the morning. The places they would hide it in were always really tricky and hard to find. So I listened closely, trying to get a few hints on the chocolates. Whereabouts? Let's put one on the top shelf. It'll drive her crazy, I heard my dad whisper, followed by the sound of my mom giggling. I also chuckled, and I heard one of them coming up the stairs quietly. Approaching my room, I pulled my blanket up to my nose, pressed my eyes shut, and began breathing very slowly, so as to pretend that I was asleep. It was my daddy. Could hear him as he made his way past my bed and fumbled around with some papers on my little desk. I then heard him walk over to the closet where he was seemingly stood still for a second, as if he was trying to make out whether I was awake. I felt my lips curling in excitement and managed to quickly press my hand onto my mouth underneath the blanket before I could giggle. My dad let out a small sigh of relief, and I heard him shove something into one of the drawers. He then slowly and ever so quietly made his way out of my room and back down the stairs all set. My mom asked him in a low voice, "Yep, let's go to sleep now." "Geez, I'm tired," he whispered back. I don't know when I fell asleep, but it must have been not long after, maybe an hour, maybe two. Either way, I was woken up by a rather loud creaking noise. Weird, I thought I had assumed my parents had gone to bed already. I stayed put and focused there. It was again a creaking noise, as if someone was climbing the upper staircase, the one right outside my room. I felt my heart beat just a little bit faster. There's no need to be nervous, I told myself. Maybe my dad forgot something. Maybe it was just the house settling. I was growing more and more nervous. Trying to calm down did not really work anymore. Panic began to set in when I saw how the door slowly inched open and a dark figure entered my room. I held my breath. The figure was tall, way taller than my mom, or Dad could not see his face or anything about it, or that matter. However, there was just enough moonlight falling into my room through the halfway drawn curtains for me to be able to make out its silhouette. It looked like that of Amun on top of its head. However, were two long, large things. They looked like rabbi tears. I swallowed. This was not normal, and this was not right. My eyes began filling with tears. The next thing I heard was it breathing long, ragged breaths. The thought of which makes me shiver to this day. Walked over to the window and pulled open the curtains, allowing the bright moonlight to flood my room. Illuminating the dark figure, pressed my eyes shut. I did not want to see what this thing looked like. By now, tears were running down my cheeks. I could hear it approaching and halting right in front of my bed, and it spoke to me in a low, raspy voice. It said, "Don't open your eyes. Let me have a look at you." It then bent down. I felt the blanket being pulled from my head. What followed was a sensation of my face being hit by warm, foul-smelling breath. Then a gloved finger caressing my cheek. My lip was quivering, and I could barely hold back a loud sob. I stood like this for a moment. Seemingly just staring at me, was contemplating what should I do. Should I yell for my parents? Should I try to run? I chose not to take a risk. I was convinced he would get a hold of me and kill me if I did so. I was paralyzed with fear. The voice mumbled. Finally, it pulled back his finger. It was still hovering over me, though. I could feel it good. "You're a good little girl. Now hold out your hand." I did as I was told, and stretched out my little hand from under the blanket again. I felt gloved fingers now, wrapping around it, as if preparing to shake it. A low chuckle erupted from my side. "That's good, kid. I have a gift for you. I'll place it on your hand now. But you must promise me not to look at it until then, next morning." Okay, I whimpered. "Do you swear on your life?" I swear on my life, yes." "Well then, there you are." I felt something soft and feathery touch my hands. I instantly wrapped my fingers around it. It almost felt like a plushie of some sort, but it was strangely cold to the touch. "Hey, where are your manners? What do you say when you receive a gift?" the voice asked in a strict tone. "Thank you, Mr. Easter Bunny," I whispered in a cracked voice. Another chuckle. "How polite can you be? Tell your mommy and daddy I said with that." It left. I heard it. Walk down the stairs and then quietly exit through the front door, pulling it shut behind it. I lay there, now beginning to sob. Quietly, the Easter Bunny's gifts still on my hands. I was woken up by my mother's ear-piercing scream. My eyelids fluttered open. It was light outside by now, and my mother was standing over me. broken cup that must have once held Cocoon. The floor next to her feet, I stumbled, out of bed and right into her arms. Mom. I wept. The Easter Bunny scared me so much long as she was my mother, picked me up and pressed my head against her shoulder. I suddenly noticed that the gift the Easter Bunny had given me was not in my hand anymore. I tried to turn my head to look at it, but my mother turned around to obscure my view. No, honey, don't. I struggled in her arms. Honey, don't look, she shouted. But it was already too late. The reason for my mother's shock suddenly became clear. Tom, I had managed to wind out of her grip, fallen onto the floor, right in front of the dead body of a small yellow chick. That's when I began screaming. I've spent many years of my teenage and young adult lives suppressing this memory. Why it came flooding back to me this Easter 6 years later, I don't know. But what I do know by now is that the thing came to me that night to talk Tom and place a dead baby bird in my hand. The thing that spent the last 12 years haunting my nightmares was not the Easter Bunny. Every Easter, my extended family all piles into cars and makes the trip out to my Uncle John's place. He lives way out in the middle of nowhere. This past year was no different. Uncle John owns a massive house that sits on a wide stretch of open land, surrounded by dense woods on every side. I've been there plenty of times before, but I'd never actually explored the forest behind his house. Nature's never really been my thing, so I never felt the urge to check it out. To be honest, I wasn't excited about the trip. I've never really connected with that side of my family. They're super into all things outdoors, hunting, fishing, living off the land. Most of them have never lived anywhere but that area. I always feel like the odd one out when I'm with them. On top of that, nearly all of my cousins are way older than me, married, raising kids, working farms. The only one close to my age is Kevin. He's a few years older, but we've always gotten along. During these family gatherings, we naturally gravitate toward each other. He gets that I don't quite fit in, and he never makes a big deal about it. We arrived at Uncle John's late Friday night. I'm an only child, so it was just me and my parents in the car. I was wiped from the drive, so I headed straight to bed. The next morning, Kevin and I spent a couple hours down in the basement playing pool. Neither of us had any real skill, but it beat being upstairs in the middle of all the holiday chaos. The house was already packed by that point. You know how those big family events go. There wasn't a TV downstairs, so Kevin put on some music from his phone while we chatted about some minor family drama, not even worth repeating. While we were playing, Kevin kept talking about the woods behind the house. He said they stretched out for miles and that no one ever really explored them all the way. He described the area like it was magical and peaceful in a way you could only understand by experiencing it. I mostly just nodded along. Again, I'm not really the outdoorsy type, but he clearly had a deep appreciation for the place. Somehow, Kevin ended up convincing me to go on a walk out there with him. I'm not sure how he managed that, but boredom probably played a big part. I was desperate for something different to do. We let Uncle John know where we were headed. He's always been chill about stuff like that. Never controlling, just wants us to be responsible. I always wished my parents were more like him. Kevin took the lead once we stepped outside, moving through the backyard and into the woods like he knew every inch. Honestly, he probably did. The forest was thick but not totally wild. There was a faint trail he seemed to be following. It wasn't too late in the afternoon, so I wasn't worried about it getting dark yet. But as we went deeper in, I started wondering how we'd find our way back. After about 20 minutes, I asked Kevin if he was sure he knew where we were going. He just laughed and said he'd been coming out here since he was a kid. He knew it like the back of his hand. We'd been walking maybe another 20 minutes when we both stopped cold. Up ahead, we heard this loud thunk. It was heavy and distinct, like something solid hitting wood. It repeated, one strike, then a pause, then another. It sounded like someone hammering, but deeper, like a mallet against a tree trunk. Not an animal, and not someone just stepping on a branch. Kevin and I exchanged looks. He said it could be a hunter, but he didn't seem too convinced. He definitely looked unsettled. The sound eventually stopped, and I asked if we should head back. Kevin shook his head. He looked intrigued now, and honestly, so was I. We kept walking toward the direction of the noise, both of us a little on edge. A few minutes later, Kevin suddenly stopped and threw his arm out to stop me too. I thought he saw someone, but then he pointed upward. It took me a second to understand what I was looking at, but then it clicked. 3 upside-down crosses had been nailed high into 3 separate trees, at least 15 or 20 feet off the ground. Way too high for someone to have done that without a ladder. Before we could even react, I caught a flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned quickly, and there he was. A man stood a few yards away, just watching us. He looked like a stereotypical lumberjack. Big beard, heavy jacket, and this intense, dark stare. Kevin immediately stepped in front of me, trying to block the man's view. Then the man spoke, not to Kevin, but to me. "You shouldn't be here." Kevin apologized immediately, saying we were leaving and we didn't waste any time. The man didn't follow us. He didn't move at all, just watched us silently as we walked away. The whole way back, we kept glancing behind us. We didn't know if he was still watching or not. I was shaking the entire time. When we made it back to the house, we went straight to Uncle John. We described the man in detail, and Uncle John listened carefully. But when we finished, he shook his head and said no one in the area matched that description. He knows everyone around for miles. He asked us several times if we were sure we weren't followed. We said no, but honestly, we couldn't be certain. Someone mentioned going out armed to sweep the woods, but Uncle John didn't want to risk confrontation or give away the location of his house. So, Kevin and I went back to the basement, and everyone else went back to preparing for Easter. I couldn't get the whole experience out of my head. That night, I went to bed early just to try to forget about it, but because of that, I woke up really early, around 5 a.m. It was barely light out. I tried to go back to sleep but couldn't, so I decided to wander up to the 3rd floor, where Uncle John keeps his study. He's got this big window up there that overlooks the backyard. As I walked past the window, something caught my eye. A faint glow was flickering at the edge of the forest, like a small fire, not a flashlight, just a pulsing, eerie orange light. I stood there for nearly a minute, trying to figure it out. Eventually, my curiosity won out, and I went downstairs and stepped out onto the back deck. That's when I realized what I was looking at. There were 3 figures standing at the tree line. Each of them held a small torch. They weren't walking, they weren't doing anything. just standing still, all facing directly toward the house, toward me. I turned and sprinted to Uncle John's room, waking him up in a panic and telling him everything. Without hesitation, he grabbed his rifle, threw on pants, and told me to stay inside. He marched out to the back deck and looked out over the yard. But by then, the figures were already gone. They'd slipped back into the forest. Uncle John didn't waste any time. He raised the rifle and fired 3 rounds into the air. That woke up the entire house, and chaos broke out. People yelling, doors opening, lights switching on. The whole Easter morning was basically ruined. Everyone was on edge the entire rest of the day. Eventually, my parents and I packed up and left, and I wasn't sad about it. It's been about 9 months now. Uncle John says nothing strange has happened since then, but honestly, I don't know how he still lives there, knowing there are people like that creeping around just beyond the trees. If anything else happens, I'll let you know.